It was a calm Saturday morning at the suburban supermarket, a place where the smell of fresh bread mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the small cafe near the entrance. Families walked slowly through the aisles, pushing carts and chatting softly with one another. Children giggled as they ran ahead of their parents, and elderly shoppers moved carefully, leaning slightly on their shopping carts. The sun streamed in through the large glass windows, creating a warm and ordinary atmosphere that made everyone feel safe. Among the shoppers was a woman who stood out quietly, though she did not draw attention with flashy clothing or expensive items. She moved with the precision and confidence of someone who had spent years disciplined by training, a woman whose presence alone commanded a subtle respect. She was a senior army officer, a person who had dedicated her life to serving her country. Her uniform was not visible today. She was dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater. Yet, even in civilian clothes, there was an air about her, a sense of control, calmness, and authority that others could sense without seeing a badge or medal. She moved slowly through the aisles, checking the shelves carefully. Her shopping list was small, but her attention to detail was meticulous. Every choice she made, from selecting fruits to examining labels on packaged goods, reflected someone who took care and thoughtfulness in everything. The army officer reached the aisle where cereals were displayed. She leaned slightly on her cart and stretched her arm to reach a box on the top shelf. Her movements were deliberate, but she was careful, making sure the box did not fall. She paused for a moment to read the label, checking the nutritional information and comparing it with what she needed. At that moment, she was focused entirely on her shopping, unaware that someone nearby was watching her with a judgmental and hostile eye. Not far from her, a police officer was patrolling the store. He was in uniform, his badge visible on his chest, his gun holstered at his side. On most days, his presence would have been reassuring to the shoppers. But this officer was different. His temperament had been tense for days, his attitude sharp and impatient. He had recently faced criticism for some of his actions in the community, though he brushed off complaints as exaggerations. Beneath his professional exterior, there were biases that he struggled to keep hidden, and today, they were beginning to surface in a dangerous way. The days following the supermarket incident brought both attention and reflection for the senior army officer. Life at her office resumed, but the memory of that tense encounter lingered in her mind. She was aware that people were still talking about the event, sharing videos and opinions on social media. Yet she remained focused on her responsibilities, refusing to let the public attention distract her from her work. She believed that professionalism was not just about moments of crisis, but also about consistency and reliability. As the weeks passed, the story of the supermarket incident began to settle into public memory, but its impact continued quietly and meaningfully. The senior army officer returned fully to her regular duties, yet she noticed subtle changes around her. Colleagues treated her with increased respect, not because she sought recognition, but because they saw her as a living example of calm judgment and professionalism in action. Her reputation for composure had spread, reinforcing her authority in everyday situations, whether in the office, in the field, or during training exercises. The police officer who had pointed the gun faced the full consequences of his actions. Internal investigations revealed patterns of misconduct and biased behavior over time, which the department could no longer ignore. His suspension turned into formal termination after review boards confirmed the seriousness of his actions. The decision sent a strong message throughout the city: professional misconduct, prejudice, and impulsive aggression would not be tolerated, and public safety could never be compromised. Community members expressed relief, noting that accountability had finally been served. Even as this officer faced consequences, the army officer remained modest. She did not dwell on his punishment or the attention she had received. Instead, she focused on positive steps forward. One day, she initiated a seminar for both military personnel and local law enforcement officers. She wanted to turn the incident into a learning opportunity for everyone. The seminar focused on situational awareness, calm communication, ethical decision-making, and de-escalation techniques. She demonstrated practical exercises that allowed participants to practice remaining calm under pressure, highlighting the importance of preparation and professional conduct. During the seminar, attendees engaged actively. They asked questions, requested examples, and participated in role-playing exercises that simulated tense situations. The Army officer provided feedback with patience and clarity, emphasizing that courage is not just about physical action, it is about thinking clearly, assessing the situation, and responding strategically. She reinforced the idea that even experienced officers could make mistakes if they let bias, anger, or fear influence their actions. The session was well received, and participants left with new insights that could help them in both their professional and personal lives. Meanwhile, community organizations continued to celebrate responsible and professional conduct. They recognized the Army officer's actions as a symbol of bravery, integrity, and discipline. Local schools invited her to speak to students about courage, professionalism, and personal responsibility. She shared her story with young audiences, highlighting the importance of calm thinking, respect for others, and preparation for unexpected challenges. Her presentations were clear, engaging, and relatable, and students responded with curiosity and admiration. Social media discussions continued as well. While the initial outrage over the incident had subsided, many continued to share her story as an example of ethical courage. People highlighted her calm demeanor, her strategic thinking, and her ability to prevent potential danger without escalating the situation. The story became a lesson in public forums, community groups, and professional networks, illustrating the power of responsible action in high-pressure moments. At the Army office, she returned to routine responsibilities with focus and diligence. She trained new recruits, reviewed operations, and oversaw logistics with her usual precision. Even small tasks were approached with professionalism, showing that her commitment to duty was constant. She understood that leadership was not just about moments of crisis but also about consistency, integrity, and reliability in every aspect of her work. Her example quietly inspired her colleagues, creating a culture of calm professionalism within her team. The community recognized her ongoing contributions. Local organizations and civic groups invited her to share insights on public safety, professional ethics, and the role of leadership in preventing conflicts. She spoke at town halls, workshops, and civic meetings, always focusing on actionable lessons and personal responsibility. Her words resonated, reinforcing the idea that courage is not just dramatic heroism, it is measured, thoughtful, and effective action that protects people and strengthens trust. Meanwhile, the police department implemented new training programs to prevent incidents like the supermarket encounter from happening again. Officers were educated on bias, situational awareness, and communication strategies. The department emphasized accountability, making it clear that reckless or discriminatory behavior would not be tolerated. Public trust gradually began to restore as citizens observed the department's efforts to ensure safety and fairness. The Army officer continued to monitor the broader effects of her actions. She read media coverage, listened to community feedback, and stayed informed about policy changes inspired by the incident. She saw that her calm and professional response had influenced not just public perception, but also institutional procedures and community standards. Her presence in these discussions was not about fame, it was about promoting responsible action and demonstrating the importance of integrity in positions of authority. One morning, she received a personal message from a young officer in training who had witnessed the incident online. The message expressed gratitude, explaining that the Army officer's calm demeanor had taught them how to remain composed during stressful situations. The young officer wrote that the story had become a reference point in their own training, inspiring them to emulate the qualities of clarity, discipline, and respect. The Army officer smiled quietly as she read the message, knowing that her actions were making a difference beyond the immediate circumstances. Months passed, and the memory of the supermarket incident became a point of reference rather than a source of ongoing stress. The Army officer had integrated the lessons into her training programs, briefings, and mentorship sessions. She continued to emphasize situational awareness, strategic thinking, and ethical conduct. Her example influenced countless individuals both within the military and in the broader community by showing that courage and professionalism are intertwined, and that responsible action in critical moments can prevent harm and inspire others. The community began to recognize the importance of support and preparation for all citizens, not just professionals in positions of authority. Discussions on public safety, bias prevention, and responsible behavior became more common. People shared her story as a teaching tool, encouraging others to remain calm, think clearly, and act responsibly during difficult situations. The incident became a catalyst for positive change, highlighting the value of preparation, training, and ethical action. Throughout all this, the Army officer remained humble and focused. She did not seek awards or recognition, her attention was always on service, duty, and the lessons learned. She continued her work with patience, diligence, and calm professionalism. Even in moments of quiet routine, she demonstrated the same discipline and integrity that had guided her during the supermarket incident. Her example served as a model for colleagues, students, and community members alike. Eventually, the story reached national audiences as well. News outlets covered her actions as a case study in professionalism and ethical courage. Analysts praised her calm response, noting that her training, discipline, and thoughtful action had prevented potential danger. They emphasized that her example illustrated how courage and responsibility are not always dramatic, they can be measured, strategic, and profoundly effective. In the Army, she received formal recognition for her actions, but it was modest and focused on the professional significance rather than personal praise. Her colleagues acknowledged her calm judgment, strategic thinking, and leadership qualities. Awards and commendations were presented in a manner that reflected the importance of ethical conduct and responsibility, rather than seeking attention or fanfare. By the end of the year, the incident had left a lasting impression on everyone involved. The police officer had lost his job due to misconduct, the department had implemented new training protocols, the community had become more aware of public safety and professional accountability, and countless individuals had learned valuable lessons in courage, discipline, and integrity. The Army officer had quietly shaped these outcomes through her calm, thoughtful, and responsible actions. Reflecting on the past months, she realized that her decision to remain composed at the supermarket had far-reaching effects. One impulsive action by someone else could have caused chaos, fear, and harm, but her training, discipline, and presence of mind had prevented escalation. More importantly, her response had influenced policies, community attitudes, and professional standards in ways she could never have predicted. She understood that true courage is measured not just in immediate action, but in long-term impact, and she took satisfaction in knowing that her example had strengthened both public trust and professional integrity. In the quiet moments of her day, she thought about the lessons she had learned and the ways in which calm, ethical action could shape outcomes. She knew that life would present future challenges, but she felt confident that she and others could meet them with clarity, professionalism, and courage. The supermarket incident had been intense, dramatic, and widely publicized, but its true significance lay in the lessons it imparted, lessons about responsibility, preparation, composure, and the importance of acting with integrity, even when the situation is difficult or stressful. And so, life continued. The Army officer returned fully to her duties, quietly inspiring those around her, and demonstrating through every action that courage, professionalism, and integrity are not just ideals, they are practical tools that guide decisions, protect people, and build trust. The incident at the supermarket became more than a story of tension and danger, it became a story of leadership, ethical conduct, and the enduring power of calm and thoughtful action. During morning briefings, her colleagues approached her cautiously, some curious, others eager to express admiration. She greeted them politely, her calm demeanor unchanged. She listened carefully as they shared what they had seen online, discussing how the incident had spread quickly and had become a topic of conversation across the city. Despite the attention, she continued to emphasize the lessons learned rather than personal recognition. Her humility impressed many, as she refused to boast about her actions, focusing instead on how the situation could be used to improve community safety. The police department, meanwhile, was actively investigating the initial officer. Internal affairs officers had gathered statements, reviewed surveillance footage, and assessed the behavior of the officer in question. It became increasingly clear that his actions had been influenced by bias and poor judgment. His impulsive decision to draw a weapon at a civilian, especially one clearly identifiable as a senior army officer, violated every protocol and standard expected of someone in law enforcement. In parallel, community organizations began organizing events to discuss public safety, professional conduct, and bias in authority roles. The army officer was invited to speak at one of these events, not to seek praise, but to provide guidance on handling high-pressure situations. She accepted, understanding the importance of educating the public and helping prevent future incidents. When she arrived at the venue, she was met with respectful nods and handshakes, but she maintained her modesty, focusing on the message rather than the attention. She spoke clearly and calmly, sharing her experience at the supermarket. She emphasized how training, preparation, and calm thinking helped her handle the situation without escalating it. She described her approach step by step, explaining how she assessed the officer's behavior, positioned herself for safety, and communicated effectively to prevent panic. She highlighted the importance of remaining composed, even when confronted with unexpected danger. Her words resonated with the audience, offering both inspiration and practical advice. Questions from attendees were thoughtful and serious. Many asked how they could remain calm in dangerous situations, and how to deal with individuals in positions of authority who acted impulsively. The army officer provided clear, practical strategies, such as observing body language, maintaining safe distance, speaking in calm tones, and relying on training and experience. She stressed that courage is not about aggression, but about measured, thoughtful action. Back at the police department, disciplinary actions began to take shape. The officer involved was placed on immediate suspension, pending further review. The department's leadership recognized the need for a decisive response to restore public trust. They announced an internal review and promised accountability for misconduct. Community leaders and advocacy groups welcomed the move, recognizing that public safety depended on officers who could control their impulses and act with fairness. Despite the attention, the army officer continued her routine with discipline. She trained new recruits, prepared reports, and oversaw operations with the same calm, professional approach that had characterized her response at the supermarket. She refused to let the incident define her day-to-day life, believing that true courage is shown not only in dramatic moments but also in consistent dedication to duty. One morning, she received a letter from a group of community members expressing gratitude. They wrote about how her actions had prevented a tragedy and inspired confidence in the community. They praised her courage, calm demeanor, and professionalism, noting that her example was a lesson in how to handle crises with intelligence and restraint. She read the letter quietly, feeling humbled. Recognition was not her goal, but it reinforced the idea that thoughtful, disciplined action could have a meaningful impact. As news coverage continued, local media interviewed experts in law enforcement, military training, and public safety. Analysts highlighted the Army officer's ability to maintain control in a tense situation, noting that her calm approach prevented panic and protected everyone in the supermarket. They contrasted her professionalism with the initial officer's reckless behavior, emphasizing the importance of training, discipline, and unbiased decision-making. The media coverage encouraged broader conversations about accountability, responsibility, and public trust in authority figures. Meanwhile, social media continued to buzz with reactions. Some users expressed outrage at the officer's behavior, discussing the consequences of prejudice in positions of authority. Others praised the Army officer's courage and calm response, sharing clips of her words and actions as examples of effective crisis management. The story became more than a local event, it became a symbol of professionalism, courage, and accountability, sparking discussions across forums, community pages, and even national platforms. Within the military, the incident was also discussed as a case study. Trainers and instructors used the situation to teach lessons on situational awareness, communication, and conflict resolution. They highlighted how the Army officer had relied on her training, observed the officer's behavior, and acted decisively without aggression. Her example became a reference point for new recruits, demonstrating how professional training and calm judgment could prevent dangerous escalations. At the supermarket, store management reviewed security protocols and emergency response plans. They consulted with the Army officer, seeking her insights on how to improve safety measures and staff training. She provided thoughtful recommendations, emphasizing the importance of clear communication, immediate reporting, and maintaining a safe environment. Her suggestions were practical, actionable, and focused on preventing similar incidents in the future. Even weeks later, the incident continued to have an impact. The officer involved faced formal hearings and disciplinary actions, with his actions under close scrutiny. The police department publicly acknowledged the misconduct, reinforcing the message that bias and reckless behavior would not be tolerated. Community confidence began to recover as the department demonstrated accountability and a commitment to professional standards. Throughout this time, the Army officer remained a model of humility and professionalism. She continued her duties without seeking attention, focusing on the work that mattered. Her approach emphasized that true courage is quiet, measured, and effective. She showed that maintaining calm in difficult situations not only protects oneself but also inspires confidence and sets an example for others. Her story inspired discussions about personal responsibility and the importance of integrity. It reminded the community that every individual in a position of authority has a responsibility to act fairly and thoughtfully. Her actions became a benchmark for evaluating professional conduct, emphasizing that courage is not just physical bravery but also mental discipline, strategic thinking, and respect for others. As the weeks passed, the initial shock of the supermarket incident faded, but the lessons endured. People remembered the Army officer's calm composure, her clear thinking, and her ability to prevent harm without confrontation. Her actions became a reminder that professionalism, discipline, and courage can make a lasting difference, even in unexpected circumstances. The incident also reinforced the importance of accountability. The officer's suspension and the department's response highlighted the consequences of misconduct, demonstrating that authority comes with responsibility. The Army officer's example served as a contrast, showing that respect, training, and calm judgment are essential qualities for anyone entrusted with public safety. By the time the investigation concluded, it was clear that the Army officer's actions had prevented what could have been a dangerous escalation. Her composed and strategic approach became a case study in public safety and professional conduct. Community leaders, educators, and trainers continued to share her example, emphasizing the importance of calm courage, preparation, and ethical decision-making in every aspect of professional life. The story of the incident traveled beyond the local community. National news outlets covered it as an example of how professionalism and calm judgment can prevent tragedy. Experts highlighted her composure, training, and strategic thinking as critical factors that ensured the safety of everyone involved. The narrative emphasized that courage is not always visible, dramatic, or loud. It can be quiet, effective, and transformative. Through it all, the Army officer remained grounded. She understood that recognition was not the goal, her focus was always on serving responsibly and maintaining safety. Her actions continued to inspire others, reminding them that courage, professionalism, and integrity are not just traits but responsibilities that shape every decision and every moment of duty. As the officer observed the Army woman, he misinterpreted her careful movements. To him, her reaching for the box and pausing to read the label seemed suspicious, though in reality it was perfectly ordinary behavior. His mind, clouded by prejudice and a sense of superiority, convinced him that he needed to take immediate action. In an instant, he drew his firearm. The sound of the metal clip sliding into place was faint, but in the quiet aisle, it carried more weight than he realized. After the supermarket incident, the senior Army officer's day continued, but it was far from ordinary. Word of what had happened had spread quickly online, and the moment she stepped outside, her phone started buzzing with messages. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers reached out, expressing concern, admiration, and curiosity. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath. The crisp air felt refreshing, yet heavy with the realization of how quickly a moment of danger could escalate in public spaces. She walked to her car slowly, observing the calm around her. People passing by had already begun to discuss the story among themselves, some pointing discreetly as they saw her, others murmuring words of admiration. She felt a mixture of pride and humility. Pride because she had managed to handle a dangerous situation without harm, humility because she had never sought recognition for her actions. Her training had always emphasized duty over personal glory, but in this case, the public's awareness seemed unavoidable. Once in her car, she placed her bag on the passenger seat and glanced at the notifications on her phone. Local news outlets were calling for statements, social media posts were circulating rapidly, and community groups had begun organizing discussions about the event. People were impressed not only by the army officer's bravery but also by the restraint she had shown. She had remained calm, professional, and strategic even when confronted with a gun, a combination of qualities that many people admired. Meanwhile, the police department had begun its internal investigation. Officers from the Internal Affairs Division arrived at the scene, reviewing security footage, interviewing witnesses, and speaking with the initial officer. Reports were being compiled carefully, as this incident would not be treated lightly. The misconduct was clear, and the department understood that public trust had been shaken. Senior officials knew they needed to act decisively to maintain credibility and reassure the community. Back in her office later that day, the army officer reflected on what had happened. She spoke with her colleagues over the phone, sharing the events calmly and analytically. Her approach was practical, focusing on facts, evidence, and the importance of maintaining safety. "It could have been much worse," she said, "but we handled it properly. That is what matters." Her colleagues responded with admiration, recognizing the presence of mind required to prevent disaster in such a tense situation. As evening approached, she received a call from a local journalist who had been following the story. The journalist asked her to recount the events for a broader audience. She agreed, but insisted on focusing on the lessons learned rather than personal recognition. She spoke clearly, emphasizing the importance of remaining calm under pressure, the value of professionalism, and the dangers of letting biases influence decision-making. Her words were thoughtful, composed, and resonant, highlighting not only the incident but also the broader societal implications. Meanwhile, the community response continued to grow. Videos and witness accounts of the incident had been shared widely, prompting discussions in forums, social media groups, and news comment sections. Many people expressed outrage at the officer's misconduct, emphasizing that trust in law enforcement is fragile and must be respected. Others highlighted the army officer's bravery, praising her composure and courage in a moment when fear and impulsive behavior could have caused tragedy. In her own reflections, the army officer considered the larger implications of what had occurred. She thought about how a single impulsive action could create fear and confusion, and how essential it was for professionals in positions of authority to maintain control. She considered the lessons for herself, for others in the military and law enforcement, and for the community at large. The incident was more than just a personal experience, it was a reminder of responsibility, awareness, and the importance of acting with integrity. The next morning, she arrived at work to find that her story had already reached higher levels of command. Senior officers were aware of the incident, and they requested a detailed report. She wrote her account carefully, emphasizing the facts, her actions, and her reflections. She remained precise, clear, and professional, aware that her words would be part of an official record. The emphasis was not on heroism but on accountability, safety, and the lessons that could be learned. Her report highlighted several important points: the importance of assessing situations carefully, the need to remain calm under pressure, the value of training and preparation, and the dangers of letting personal biases influence decisions. She made recommendations for how similar situations could be handled in the future, focusing on communication, de-escalation techniques, and the importance of public awareness. Her approach was methodical, thoughtful, and practical, demonstrating her commitment to both her profession and her community. In the community, discussions continued. People shared their interpretations of the event, debating how the officer had acted, the role of bias in professional misconduct, and the importance of accountability. Many praised the Army officer's courage, noting that her calm response had prevented a potentially tragic outcome. Others expressed concern about the initial officer's behavior, questioning how someone entrusted with public safety could act so recklessly. The story had become a case study in professionalism, courage, and the consequences of impulsive actions. Over the following days, news outlets interviewed experts on law enforcement, military training, and community safety. Analysts discussed the importance of de-escalation, communication, and situational awareness. They highlighted how the Army officer's actions reflected years of disciplined training, emphasizing that her calm and measured response had prevented what could have been a dangerous escalation. This coverage further reinforced the lesson that courage, professionalism, and clear thinking are essential in maintaining public safety. At the same time, the police department took decisive action regarding the officer involved. Internal reviews confirmed the misconduct, and disciplinary measures were considered carefully. The decision was not only about addressing the specific incident but also about setting a precedent for accountability and restoring public trust. The seriousness with which the department approached the situation sent a message that impulsive actions, prejudice, and misconduct would not be tolerated. Despite the attention, the Army officer remained humble. She continued her duties, attending meetings, reviewing reports, and managing her responsibilities with the same calm focus she had shown during the supermarket incident. She understood that the public response was important, but she also knew that her job was to serve responsibly and professionally, whether or not her actions received recognition. Her behavior set an example for her colleagues, demonstrating that true courage and professionalism are measured not by attention but by action. Community leaders also reached out, commending her for her bravery and for the way she had handled the situation. They emphasized that her actions had prevented potential harm and had provided an example of how composure and courage can make a difference in public safety. They encouraged discussions about respect, accountability, and professional responsibility, using the incident as a case study for community engagement and awareness. Throughout it all, the Army officer remained composed. She spoke with calm authority, answered questions with precision, and maintained her focus on the lessons rather than the drama. Her demeanor reflected years of training and experience, demonstrating that even in the most stressful situations, calm thinking, measured action, and professionalism can prevent unnecessary harm. By the end of the week, the supermarket incident had evolved into a story with multiple layers. It was a story of courage under pressure, of the importance of accountability, and of the consequences of bias and impulsive action. It highlighted how a single moment could influence public perception, professional integrity, and community trust. And at the center of it all was a senior Army officer whose calm, measured response had prevented what could have been a dangerous escalation. Even as the initial shock faded, the lessons endured. The Army officer's example became a topic of discussion in professional circles, educational programs, and community forums. Her story emphasized the value of preparation, the importance of calm judgment, and the critical role of courage in protecting oneself and others. People recognized that true bravery is not always visible or dramatic. It is often quiet, calculated, and effective, preventing harm before it occurs. The incident left a lasting impression, both on those who witnessed it firsthand and on the wider community that learned of it through media coverage. It reminded everyone that professionalism, accountability, and courage are essential, not only for public safety but for maintaining trust and respect in society. The Army officer's calm and effective response served as a powerful example of these values in action, showing that even in moments of danger, one can act decisively, responsibly, and with integrity. The moment the police officer lowered his weapon, the atmosphere in the supermarket remained tense. Shoppers breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the fear and shock still lingered in the air. Many of them had never seen anything like this before: a uniformed officer pointing a gun at a civilian, and that civilian calmly standing her ground. It was a scene that felt unreal, almost like something out of a movie, yet it was happening in their own neighborhood store. The senior army officer stayed calm, but her senses remained alert. Her training had taught her to be prepared for any sudden change, and she knew that the officer's impulsive behavior could flare up again at any moment. She slowly took a step back, maintaining eye contact, showing that she was not afraid, yet ensuring her safety. Her voice, calm but firm, carried through the aisle. "Please step away from the aisles. Let's resolve this safely." Store employees, who had been cautiously approaching, now positioned themselves between the officer and the shoppers. A manager, looking worried, tried to keep the crowd at a safe distance. "Everyone, please move back. Stay calm. Help is on the way," he said. His voice was steady but carried the weight of urgency. People moved slowly, some clutching their phones to record the situation, others calling friends or family to report what was happening. Meanwhile, the officer's hands were shaking slightly as he stood frozen in place. He had acted impulsively, letting his personal prejudices cloud his judgment. The realization that he had made a serious mistake began to sink in, and the presence of witnesses only increased his discomfort. His mind raced, thinking about the consequences he might face, but his pride and stubbornness made it difficult for him to admit that he had been wrong. The army officer continued speaking, her tone steady and commanding, without anger or frustration. "I understand that you are a police officer," she said, "but pointing a weapon at someone without reason is unacceptable. Lower your gun and step aside. No one needs to get hurt." Her calm reasoning contrasted sharply with his erratic behavior, creating a clear distinction between professionalism and impulsive fear. Several shoppers had begun recording the event on their phones, capturing clear video of the confrontation. Some whispered to each other, expressing both shock and admiration. "Did you see that? She didn't panic at all," said one shopper. "That officer has no right to act like that," said another. The army officer's courage became obvious to everyone in the aisle. People were beginning to recognize that it was her calm composure and confidence that had prevented a tragedy. As store security approached, they gently guided the police officer away from the crowd. He hesitated at first, his face red with embarrassment and anger. It was clear he had never faced such public scrutiny before. The security team remained firm, ensuring that no sudden movement could escalate the situation further. The officer was escorted to a quiet office in the back of the store, away from the eyes of the public. In the meantime, the army officer took a moment to ensure that the other shoppers were safe. She walked slowly through the aisle, making sure that everyone had moved to safe positions and that no one had panicked. A few children clung to their parents, their eyes wide with fear, while some adults tried to reassure them quietly. The atmosphere was tense, but slowly, the sense of immediate danger began to fade. One of the employees called 911, explaining the situation clearly and calmly. "We have a police officer who pointed a gun at a civilian in our store," she said. "The civilian is a senior army officer. Security is escorting the officer to a safe area. We need law enforcement to handle this immediately." While waiting for the response, the army officer stayed close to the manager, ensuring that the scene remained calm and that no one acted impulsively. Within minutes, police backup arrived, responding to the 911 call. The new officers quickly assessed the situation. They recognized the seriousness of the incident immediately and began taking control. The initial officer was questioned and instructed to hand over his weapon. His actions were recorded, and he was reminded that pointing a firearm at a civilian without cause was a severe violation of protocol. The senior army officer answered questions calmly. She described the events in detail, explaining her movements and intentions. She spoke clearly and confidently, providing a timeline of what had happened and why there had been no threat. Her testimony was precise, demonstrating both her awareness of the situation and her professionalism. The clarity and authority in her words helped the responding officers understand the gravity of the misconduct. Meanwhile, the shoppers, still watching from a distance, whispered to one another. Some were amazed at her composure. Others were angry that a person sworn to protect the public had acted so recklessly. Conversations started spreading beyond the store as people began posting videos and recounting the incident online. Within hours, the story was circulating on social media, drawing attention from local news outlets and community leaders. Back in the store, the army officer continued to maintain her calm demeanor, even as the initial shock began to wear off. She spoke with store employees, ensuring they were okay and that everyone was safe. She explained what she had experienced and advised them to review the security footage carefully. Her presence of mind kept the store calm and helped prevent anyone from acting impulsively in the tense situation. The police officers who had arrived quickly took control of the situation. They separated the initial officer from the crowd and began a thorough investigation. Witnesses were asked to provide their accounts, and security footage was secured. The responding officers recognized that the behavior of the initial officer was not only inappropriate but also potentially dangerous. They treated the army officer with respect, acknowledging the bravery she had shown in such a high-pressure situation. As the investigation continued in the store, word began to spread rapidly. Community members who had seen the videos shared them widely, highlighting both the misconduct of the police officer and the courage of the senior army officer. Public reactions ranged from shock to admiration, with many expressing gratitude that no one had been harmed and that the situation had been resolved without violence. The army officer remained composed throughout, answering questions from law enforcement and explaining her actions in detail. Her ability to stay calm, even under extreme pressure, became the focus of public admiration. She demonstrated that courage is not always about confrontation but about maintaining control, thinking clearly, and preventing harm in dangerous situations. By the time the police department began its internal review, the evidence was clear. Witness statements, security camera footage, and the videos captured by shoppers all confirmed the army officer's account. The initial officer's actions had been reckless, unjustified, and influenced by bias, and the department recognized the need for immediate and decisive action. As shoppers left the store later that day, many expressed relief and gratitude. They spoke about the courage they had witnessed, the professionalism of the army officer, and the seriousness of the officer's misconduct. Conversations buzzed about accountability and the importance of holding people in positions of power responsible for their actions. The army officer herself quietly left the supermarket after ensuring that everything was under control. She carried herself with dignity, her calm composure never wavering. She had faced a dangerous situation, yet her training, experience, and courage had prevented a potential tragedy. Her actions were a reminder that professionalism, discipline, and calm thinking can make a critical difference in even the most frightening circumstances. By the end of the day, the incident had become a story of bravery, professionalism, and accountability. People talked not only about the police officer's misconduct but also about the calm and courageous response of the army officer, whose presence of mind had prevented a disaster. The story would continue to spread, serving as both a warning about prejudice and impulsive behavior, and as an inspiring example of courage under pressure. The supermarket, once quiet and ordinary, had become the scene of a remarkable and unforgettable encounter. While the shoppers returned to their routines, the lessons of the day lingered. Respect, caution, and calm courage had proven far more powerful than fear, prejudice, or aggression. The army officer's composure had turned a potentially tragic situation into a powerful example of strength and professionalism, one that would resonate with the shoppers near the aisle froze. Some looked over their shoulders in confusion, while others instinctively dropped their carts a little to step back. Children who had been running ahead of their parents stopped in place, unsure of what was happening. The bright, ordinary morning suddenly felt tense, as if a storm had passed over the calm sky. The air seemed heavier, charged with fear, disbelief, and the anticipation of something that could spiral out of control in seconds. The senior army officer sensed the sudden change in the atmosphere immediately. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting the officer's. In that brief moment, she recognized the danger. Despite the threat, she did not panic. Her years of training had taught her to assess situations quickly, to measure risk, and to respond with calm authority. Her mind raced, but her expression remained steady. She did not scream or make sudden movements. She stood tall, her posture firm but not aggressive, her eyes locking with his in a way that silently demanded reason and restraint. The police officer's finger hovered near the trigger, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to maintain composure. He was caught between his training, which instructed him to protect the public, and his own impulsive assumptions. In that tense moment, his judgment failed him. Shoppers gasped softly, some whispering to each other, while others quietly recorded the scene on their phones, sensing that something extraordinary and frightening was happening. The army officer's calm voice cut through the tension, firm and commanding. She identified herself clearly, stating her rank and position. Her voice was steady, like a calm river running through chaos. "I am a senior army officer," she said. "Lower your weapon. There is no reason for this." Her words were not loud, but they carried weight. They were precise, respectful, and authoritative all at once. She refused to be intimidated, demonstrating that courage is not always loud or aggressive, sometimes, it is quiet and unwavering. Other shoppers now began to take notice more clearly. Some moved their phones from instinctive recording to actively filming, capturing the confrontation that was unfolding before their eyes. The supermarket employees had noticed the commotion and began to approach cautiously, ready to intervene if necessary. Someone at the checkout called the store's security office, while another shopper discreetly dialed 911, their hands slightly shaking as they tried to explain the situation. The police officer, realizing that he was being watched and recorded, hesitated for a moment. His confidence faltered as he became aware that his actions were visible to multiple witnesses, and that the consequences of any misstep could be severe. He had acted impulsively, letting his personal biases override his professional judgment. The realization slowly began to creep in that he was no longer in control of the situation, and the tension that had been building in his chest began to transform into a mix of fear and anger. Throughout this, the senior army officer did not waver. She maintained her stance, her eyes never leaving his. She spoke calmly again, emphasizing reason and control. "There is no threat here," she said. "Step back and lower your weapon. We can resolve this safely." Her tone was steady, her patience remarkable under such intense pressure. She knew that any sudden movement, either by herself or by the officer, could escalate the situation into violence, and she worked carefully to prevent that outcome. Shoppers continued to watch in disbelief, whispering among themselves. Some were shocked that a law enforcement officer, someone who should have protected the public, could act so recklessly. Others felt admiration for the army officer's composure, realizing that her presence of mind had prevented what could have been a tragic situation. In the background, the soft hum of the supermarket's air conditioning and the faint sound of carts rolling over tiles contrasted sharply with the seriousness of the confrontation. As seconds stretched into what felt like minutes, the officer slowly began to lower his weapon, the tension in his body visibly relaxing just slightly. The army officer's calm and deliberate approach had worked. Her training, experience, and unwavering self-control had prevented disaster. Witnesses whispered to one another, some nodding in quiet approval, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what had just occurred. By the time store security arrived and gently guided the officer away, the immediate danger had passed. The army officer remained composed, though her heart still beat faster than normal. She collected herself, adjusted her shopping cart, and continued with her day, though the memory of the confrontation lingered. Shoppers resumed their routines slowly, some stopping to comment to each other about what they had just witnessed, others posting short videos online, knowing that this incident would soon be widely discussed. In that moment, the calm morning at the supermarket had been transformed into a defining event. It was a story of courage, quick thinking, and the stark contrast between professionalism and prejudice. The army officer had faced a direct threat, yet her training and presence of mind had prevented harm. Meanwhile, the officer's actions had sown fear and tension, highlighting the dangers of impulsive decisions fueled by bias. This encounter, brief as it was, would set in motion events that no one in the supermarket could have predicted. The recordings, the witness accounts, and the clear distinction between right and wrong would later play a major role in how the situation was resolved. But in this moment, all that mattered was the calm bravery of one woman in the face of an unnecessary threat, and the lesson that courage and composure can prevent even the most dangerous situations from spiraling out of control.